History teaches you about dates, characters, treaties, geography, and wars. But what does it not tell you? It doesn't talk about several of the resolutions that failed to bring justice to people involved in certain conflicts. A nation that is well known for its involvement in all sorts of conflicts is the United States of America. Throughout its history, there have been a massive amount of wars and violent conflicts that have required the breaking of laws and policies in order to overcome them. In the mid-1950s, the country started a war against communism in Vietnam. Millions of soldiers were recruited to combat this issue, and the government was open to any method to get more people to join the military. There was a special group of soldiers who agreed to serve under one condition: receiving a U.S. citizenship. These were Mexican-born residents who were brought to the United States as infants and were therefore illegal. After serving in the military, some of these veterans committed small crimes such as drug or weapon possession, animal abuse, and thefts. A consequence to this was immediately established, but it did not go accordingly to the protocol that would take place with an American citizen. These veterans, who were willing to fight and give their lives for the U.S., were deported. Honorably discharged, dishonorably deported became a famous saying amongst the deported Mexican veterans, some of which don't remember any other home than the United States to this day. After obtaining their military card, they were promised a permanent legal residency status and full citizenship rights. But once they committed individual small crimes, veterans like Héctor Barajas, Gonzalo Chaides, and Edwin Salgado mentioned their past as soldiers, so their attorneys guaranteed no immigration actions would be taken against them. The judges, on the other hand, did not acknowledge them as citizens with full rights, so they decided to send them back to a country that they had no memory of. The reports of the conversations that assured full rights were never made or recorded.
Hundreds of veterans who have served honorably as legal U.S. residents in the military. After discharge, they ran afoul of the law for possession of illegal drugs or another nonviolent crime. As a result, their legal status was revoked and they were deported.
Barajas was under the assumption that he took the oath and became a U.S. citizen, pointing out that the oath of enlistment is similar to the oath of naturalization, and claimed that the army never prepared him for moving through the naturalization process. Citizenship was never mentioned, it was never counseled, there's no program for it, he said in an interview. Nowadays, there is a place in Tijuana, Mexico called the Bunker, also referred to as the Deported Veterans Support House. Former Marine Héctor Barajas started this organization to provide support and shelter for the deportees. It, however, lacks from connections with organizations that specialize in treating mental injuries and other conditions that come from war and the separation from loved ones. Barajas declared that before starting this foundation, he lived in the streets without any support. It is this type of treatment and oblivion that has built such a strong group of men that fight to return to the place they call home. In Edwin Salgado's case, his family moved to the U.S. when he was a young kid. He later joined the army to fight in Kuwait, and a few years after serving, he was deported for drug and weapon charges. Like the other former soldiers, he wasn't aware that this process could take place against someone who sacrificed his life for his country. Another case comes from Mario de la Cruz, an ex-army member who was deported to Mexico and currently lives in Tijuana. His family immigrated to the U.S. when he was 6 months old. He was in the army for 6 years and then pursued the career of personal training. During his last few years in the United States, he earned good payment and managed to raise a family with 6 children. In 2007, his whole life changed after he signed papers to help a relative, which was an act of perjury. 2 years into his prison sentence, he was deported to Mexico, finding Héctor Barajas and his comrades after some months. The bunker has helped him stabilize his life as he saves money and builds his reputation as a trainer. His psychological state has also become better. He mentions that it is helpful for him to be around similar people who are deported service members. The third name is Jesus Juárez Castillo, who grew up in San Diego and became a Marine. During his time in combat in 1974, he fell off the back of a moving vehicle, which caused him to be in coma for weeks. Once he came back to his hometown, his father died unexpectedly. He went through a mental stage of grief and began doing drugs, so he got both kicked out of the Marines and arrested. They took away his green card and he was expelled from the nation, losing soldier benefits and remaining with a mental condition. Several other cases have involved fraud, which was mostly committed with the intention of being eligible to serve or getting a job opportunity. In Rodriguez's case, he lived under a fake name and joined the Marines in 1985. 15 years after this, The FBI arrested him and took him into immigration offices, which also ended up in deportation. All of his veterans' benefits were lost because they were attached to the false identity. After a few years, he developed a prescription drug addiction that began during his deployment in the Persian Gulf. His finding of the bunker in Tijuana was described as finding a lost relative. The support from all of the deportees is helpful, and they do it so that the victims don't end up in the streets doing bad things and potentially risking their lives to criminal organizations. Most of the Mexican soldiers were enlisted in the army. They were not drafted in any way to be a part of it. Mexicans were not the only ones that suffered deportation consequences. Jamaicans, Canadians, Costa Ricans, Italians, Germans, and numerous other foreign veterans also received unfair consequences that involved expulsion from the United States.
I was there in 71, 72. By God, 40 years later, Homeland Security tell me I'm not worth nothing. I'm a Marine.
In 1948, the American GI Forum was founded with the goal of assisting Hispanic veterans in education and civil rights. Dr. Hector P. Garcia has established this group in Texas to deal with concerns such as Mexican American veterans being discriminated and segregated from veteran groups. The organization also attempted to tackle issues like the World War II veterans being denied medical services by the United States Department of Veteran Affairs, proving that the compromises that were made with these former soldiers were not good, and that affects several heroes today. Post-war diseases like the well-known PTSD were not considered, and all of the deportees lost their medical rights, and they were not able to receive the medical help they required to overcome the marks that war left in and on them. Currently, the only way they can return home to their friends and loved ones is in a box, dead. They would receive military burials even though they were previously kicked out of the country. Several protests have been made, but there is still a lack of attention towards this issue. Although some of the veterans have a chance to redeem themselves and reapply to be eligible to go back, Hector Barajas has mentioned that this option is pointless because in order for this process to take place, a meeting inside the United States would have to happen. As a handful of politicians have looked over this issue, sets of bills were introduced to help the deported veterans, but response has not yet come to this date. This has simply not been a priority for the government because of all the other national and international situations that, according to them, need to be looked at.
What you are describing to me seems to me to be an outrage. If people put their lives on the line to defend this country, are willing to die for this country, I don't think you deport those.
Barajas was able to hold a conference with 6 congressmen, including San Diego Representative Juan Vargas. In this meeting, they signed a pledge that stated that anyone who is willing to join the U.S. military, fight, and give their life for the U.S. should be a citizen, and not a subject to deportation for the country they serve. Other political and immigration authorities argued that the veterans had the opportunity to apply for a formal U.S. citizenship, and that they should deal with the consequences because of this. They argued that the military has a fast-tracking program for foreign service members to receive a citizenship. Representative Vicente Gonzalez still argues that this is not an immigration issue, but a veterans issue. In 2015, Gonzalo Chaidez, former member of the Support House, died from tuberculosis because he did not receive the necessary medical attention his health required. This could have been easily treated anywhere in the United States, but the right to come back did not exist. Chaidez is now the first Mexican veteran deportee who came back to his loved ones inside a coffin. While this is a problem that may not yet be considered as history because of its currency, this matter is related to the resolutions that came from wars such as the one in Vietnam and Afghanistan. After those conflicts, the nation thought peace was reached and everyone was content. After a few years, however, the government forgot about the people that contributed to the results of these valid conflicts. Right next to other big situations that America encounters today, this one must be resolved so the honorably discharged veterans can be honorably brought back home. America is a nation that applauds the talent and potential that comes from it, but on the other hand, it is also a country that forgets. It forgets its foundation, its Bill of Rights, its Declaration of Independence, and most importantly, the numerous soldiers who fought and risked their lives for it.